Shalom, shalom. This week's Parsha are Matot and Masei. And I'm going to go skip all the way to the end because, of course, it mentions the Binot Tzlophchod once more. As we mentioned them in the previous Parsha, that these daughters, 5 daughters of Tzlophchod, came to Moshe and said that their father died of his own sin, had no sons, and why should his name be lost? Because they were giving out inheritance, and inheritance only went to the sons, and they were worried that their father's name would be lost, and they wanted to perpetuate the name of their father. So they asked Moshe to give them an inheritance with their achim, their brothers, their family members, the tribe of Manasseh. To which Moshe didn't know the answer, went to God. God said they spoke correctly and put the law straight of what happens if a man has no sons, that the inheritance goes to the daughters. Now, in our Parsha, and we're still talking about division of the land and everything, from the tribe, we're told, from this tribe of Manasseh came Bnei Gilad, Ben Macher, Ben Manasseh, Mishpachot, Bnei Yosef. This leader from this tribe came to Moshe and said, listen, it's not fair. These Benot Tzlophchod, these 5 daughters, they're going to get an inheritance and they're going to marry out, and then the land that should have gone to our tribe is going to go to a different tribe, and it's going to diminish our portion. So then Moshe tells them, you know what you're saying makes sense. As God prescribed, these women, these 5 women, the daughters of Tzlophchod, that they should marry. They should go and see whoever they find tovot, the best of who they find in their eyes is appropriate to marry them. They should marry them and keep the land within the tribe. And it's very interesting to me because it didn't say that he said to this leader, okay, so find some men that will marry them and the land will stay within the tribe. There's a point being made, I think, from God that's like really putting a stamp of approval on these daughters of Tzlophchod. Now, why I say this, it reminds me very much of the story that happens later on, the story of Ruth, where we know Ruth was a Moabite who came back with her mother-in-law after the famine was over, and her father-in-law and her husband had died, and when she wanted to marry Boaz, who was one of the redeemers, and she wanted to marry him, he said, wait, we're going to go, there's a closer relative who could marry you, and I'm going to see if he wants to perform this love right marriage. And he goes to him and he asks him if he wants the land. It's Naomi has the land from her husband. That would go to her husband, that would go to her sons, and now there's only Naomi and Ruth. And so whoever would perform this love right marriage would get the land. Now the Goel first hears about the land and he's like all gung-ho, yeah, sure. And then when Boaz says, well, you'll have to marry Ruth, he's like, oh, wait a minute, I don't think so. I don't want my inheritance to be destroyed. Say what? Why would his inheritance be destroyed? Now I used to think it's because of this law that it says in the Torah that the Israelites are not allowed to marry in the Moabite nation. Now the law was that, but technically the halacha was you can't marry the men, but the women you could. So I thought that he just did not know that law. But I was discussing this parsha with a very learned rabbi who knows this stuff, and said, no, they did know that you can marry a Moabite. You just couldn't marry. You could marry a woman into the nation, but you can't marry just the men. It was known, but nobody wanted to put it into practice. So he didn't want to put it into practice. So I'm thinking, here he had only to gain, like to get a big chunk of really good land. As we know, Elimelech was a very, very rich man, and he would have really greatly benefit. And Ruth was like an amazing woman. So why wouldn't he want to marry her and get this land? It didn't make sense if the law was that he could do it. And I think the reason was it had to do with the fact that Elimelech, her father-in-law, had done a sin by moving out in the time of famine, and his sons intermarried with the Moabites, and they had sinned, and they had all died. All the men had died, and he didn't want to associate himself with this family of people that have committed sins. And so he stepped away because he didn't want to murky up his name. He didn't know, whatever. Okay, understood. Boaz married Ruth instead, and David HaMelech, and eventually the Melech HaMashiach is going to come from Boaz. So this is what the other guy missed out, because he was afraid. He was afraid to marry into this, where it had sin attached to it. And I think the same thing is with the Benot Tzlophchod, because when God said, let them choose the men that are good in their eyes, is what God's saying is, yes, their father died, and he died from his sin. But the sin of the father is not passed on automatically to the children. These women are righteous women. These women have a keen sense for what is right, what is good, what is true. When they saw something, it wasn't in the law, and they came to Moshe because their instinct, they understood what even the greatest people then didn't understand, and then God gave a stamp of approval, and God understood that was how they operated. They looked intensely for the right thing to do, and that's why their names are mentioned not once, not twice, not 3 times. They have their names each individually mentioned in the Torah several times, which is really rare in the Torah, especially for women. But that's because these women really lived up to the essence, to why they were created, they achieved not only their job as women, but a job that a man should do. They perpetuated the name of the family. And that they knew, and they tried to live their lives in the right way. And so God says, let them pick the best of the men from their tribe. They'll do the right job. They'll know who's the right person. And therefore they did that. And I think the lesson here is that we are so quick to judge people based on who we think they came from, or what we think we know about surrounding information that's given to us. But that's not for us to do. Okay, yichus is a nice thing. It's a nice thing to look into it, and great, it's a bonus if it has it, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. You have to look at a person themselves. Sit with them, talk to them, see, do they have a refined personality? How do they act? What are their characteristics? What do they want? What motivates them? What is their motivating factor in this world? What are they trying to do with their lives? And how do they go about doing it? And then decide if you want this person in your life, or to interact with them, or to marry them. These are the qualities we should be looking for in people. And I think that's what the Torah is trying to teach us this week. With that, I wish you a very good Shabbat Shalom.